Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today at this event honoring my good friend, Emily Rafferty. I've always looked up to Emily. As an older student at the Convent of the Sacred Heart, Emily and her sisters, who are here today, set an example of faith and citizenship, qualities which continue to mark her life and career. We also have a kind of a family connection, which is too complicated to explain, but it's sort of my relative's relative married her relative. And later, when I worked at the Metropolitan, Emily was a younger version of the same creative, dynamic, effective professional that she is today. We worked closely together then, and later when she made a personal commitment and championed and managed the complicated exhibition, Jacqueline Kennedy, The White House Years. Working at the museum was a tremendous education for me, and that's what I think I'd like to talk to you about today, education. My first job after college was at the Metropolitan's Office of Film and Television, as Lowry said, and the mission was to bring the museum's collections to the widest possible audience and the museum experience to those who could not visit in person. The program that had the greatest impact on me was Don't Eat the Pictures, Sesame Street at the Metropolitan Museum. It was a musical in which children and the Muppets got locked in the museum overnight and discovered an ancient Egyptian boy lost in the Temple of Dendur, who had to answer a riddle before midnight. The program was complete with a scene of Osiris weighing the boy's heart against a feather, provided, of course, by Big Bird. This program brought the museum and its collections not just to a wide television audience, but to a different audience. It starred and appealed to children and families who didn't often visit the Met, and it made the museum seem more accessible to people who often find it intimidating. Though the museum was founded in part to educate and civilize the waves of immigrants in the late 19th century, it's supported by the city of New York, and it makes tremendous efforts to reach out to the public in so many ways. Many of the people who live in this city still don't feel like such institutions belong to them and have never really experienced the joy that art can bring into our lives. Schools are the places that can change that. And for many children, schools are the first and often the only place where they are exposed to art. Most people are aware that urban education in this country is in a state of crisis, and New York is no exception. And it has reached the point that none of us, whether or not we have children in the public school system or grew up here in New York, can really afford to think of this as somebody else's problem. New York has approximately 1.1 million students in 1,400 schools who speak 140 languages at home and are overwhelmingly poor. To give you an idea of how bad things had gotten, not long after I started working at the Department of Education, I visited a high school in the Bronx that had an enrollment of about 3,500 students. Yet that year, only 118 diplomas were to be awarded. I'm happy to say that things have changed a lot since then, though we still have a long way to go. Under Mayor Bloomberg, New York has launched the most ambitious school reform effort in the nation, starting hundreds of new and innovative small schools, training new generation of principals, and increasing accountability throughout the system. Test scores are up for the first time in years, and on-time graduation rates are the highest in a generation, though still only about 60%. One of the key levers of change has been the effort to strengthen the connection between the schools and the broader city community, including the business sector, the cultural community, and average New Yorkers. As we know, of course, education takes place in the classroom, but schools can't do it alone. In order for a school to be successful, it takes an entire community: faculty, staff, parents, neighbors, local businesses, and alumni. That's the kind of spirit that we've been trying to build across New York City, because in our schools, these children are really the future of this city, and it's up to all of us, the adults, to make sure that they get the education they need to succeed. Creating strong public-private partnerships is absolutely critical to transforming our schools. Some of these partnerships are financial. For example, the business community has supported small school development and the training of new leaders. The philanthropic foundations community has supported infrastructure reform and small school development. And we've reached out to ordinary citizens through large-scale events like concerts in Central Park or citywide tag sales. Our annual Shop for Class retail promotion raises money for school libraries, literacy programs, and arts. And these are, of course, the financial support is important, but we hope people will take the next step through these larger events and think about what they can contribute themselves, if they have the time or the talent to volunteer or be a mentor or give in-kind donations. But for me, the most meaningful part of this effort to strengthen the public-private partnerships is in an area that's really unique to this city, and that's arts education. And it's really an area where the broader city community can have and actually does have a direct impact on the education of our children. And the pieces are in place now to build and strengthen this relationship in ways I think that they haven't been for quite a while. Our schools spend $285 a year on arts ed for each child. And even with this is not a lot of money, but some schools really have the best arts program you have ever seen. Principals are able to bring their schools to life with visual art, music, theater and dance, collaboratively taught, interdisciplinary. I mean, in Long Island City High School, which is known both for its auto body repair shop, as well as an oversubscribed program that the principal runs where students come in before school to listen to the opera. Other schools really struggle with safety and other issues, and it's not easy to provide an arts program that's high quality, and others write it off as recess. As many of you know well, arts education has a tortured history in New York. It was decimated by the budget crisis in the 1970s, and it's struggled to regain its footing ever since. In the 1990s, after years of effort by many people in this room, Project Arts was established. It was hailed as a great victory by arts advocates. It set aside a sum of money to be used to hire and train arts teachers, buy equipment and materials, create partnerships with cultural organizations. But the level of funding varied, and suspicion remained that many schools weren't using the money for the arts. But within this history, I think, lie the seeds for future success. Before I talk about that future, let me just take a moment to describe an important current issue. In recent years, arts education has struggled to hold its own against the backdrop of the wider educational debate over standards and testing. For arts ed, the issue of testing is extremely difficult, though the need remains to understand whether and how children are learning. On the one hand, the creative process cannot be quantified in the same way as comprehension in reading or achievement in math. On the other hand, without some way of benchmarking achievement, the value of the arts may never be apparent to school leaders who aren't already converts. This is frustrating since research shows and anecdotal evidence confirms what I'm sure all of us feel, which is that a strong arts program is critical to student achievement. Art gives children from different cultural traditions a way to communicate with each other and share their heritage. We know that music helps math, and dance gives children who may not speak English or who have trouble sitting still an outlet for their expression. Art teaches kids how to find their own voice and listen to others, how to analyze the world they live in, and how to make choices based on fundamental values, skills that are absolutely critical in today's world. And to put it bluntly, in a system where thousands of kids are still dropping out every year, as one principal said to me, art gives kids a reason to come to school. During the current administration, Mayor Bloomberg, Deputy Mayor Patty Harris, and Cultural Commissioner Kate Levin, and Chancellor Joel Klein have made a profound commitment to improving arts in the schools. They have made it clear that arts education is critical, not just because it helps math scores, but because arts literacy is an integral part of living in a civilized society. Over the past 5 years, a number of significant steps have been taken to improve arts ed in New York. They have been based on 3 important principles: access, equity, and excellence. How do we make sure that all students are receiving a high-quality arts education in a system where the vast majority of students are geographically isolated, poor, and schools are the only place where they experience the art that this city is known for? Most significant is the blueprint for teaching and learning in the arts. It's a rigorous, integrated K-12 arts curriculum. For the first time, the DOE Department of Education convened groups of educators and representatives from the cultural community to work together to create a framework for arts ed. It contains 5 strands of learning over visual arts, theater, music, and dance: arts making, arts literacy, making connections between arts, community and cultural resources, and careers in lifelong learning. It's aligned with the state standards, and it sets benchmarks in grades 2, 5, 8, and 12. When it was completed in 2004, and it was the first of its kind, and it's become a model since for cities across the country. In addition, Sharon Dunn, who's a nationally respected arts educator, returned to the Department of Education as a senior instructional manager for the arts and built a policy around the fact that the commitment of the principal is really the key to a successful school-based arts program. We set up citywide culture fairs to build awareness about the options and resources that are available to schools. One's happening actually at the Metropolitan next week. And started the Culture Pass program for principals to get free passes to cultural institutions. Cultural organizations increased professional development for principals and teachers. The Department of Education provided scheduling workshops to help schools find time for arts in a crowded and demanding school day. And the 5th annual PS Art Exhibition, which I know there's some of my fellow jurors here, of student artwork from around the city, opened last Friday at the Tweed headquarters of the Department of Education, if any of you want to visit. I have served as a judge for the last 5 years, and the improvement of the quality of the work since the blueprint has been implemented is really breathtaking. But all of these efforts require the active involvement of the cultural institutions that you represent and additional private sector financial support. The issue of what constitutes a quality arts education is one that we still need to work on, and we're at a critical moment right now. In brief, the schools are undergoing a radical restructuring. Some people are concerned that it's the 3rd effort in almost as many years, and authority is shifting to the schools from the central office. Principals are being given approximately $200,000 in additional discretionary spending, in exchange for which they will be held accountable for student assessment and student achievement. School-based report cards will be issued showing how their schools are functioning, and failing schools will be shut down. So where does this leave the arts? Project Arts money will no longer be set aside, and arts advocates fear that principals, increasingly concerned about student test scores in reading and math, might simply drop the arts. But the Chancellor has promised that if it appears that schools cut the arts, he will reinstate them. And for the first time, there will be an annual Arts in Schools survey and report card that will track access, participation, satisfaction, and quality across the system. And there are encouraging signs that the arts can stand on their own. Last year, the trial group of schools that had additional discretion over their budget, called empowerment schools, spent more money on the arts than they had in the past. So that in the future, we will be able to confirm, I think, what veteran educators will tell you, that schools with students who succeed across the board are the schools with strong art programs. And for the community of people who care about the arts, this is a time and a great opportunity. For most of us here today, the arts are a way of life. It isn't possible to imagine this city without them. But that isn't true in the schools. And the system cannot protect and cultivate the arts without the support and involvement of all of us. Now is the time to get serious about paying attention to what's happening, taking responsibility, and becoming involved. Cultural organizations and foundations need to give time and resources to monitor and assess what is actually happening in the schools, not just what's reported by those who have the most to gain or lose. Above all, we need to have a better definition of what constitutes a quality arts education. The cultural community could really take the lead in this conversation and not fall back on arguments that artistic achievement isn't measurable or success is subjective, for those arguments won't succeed in today's world. We need to apply the creativity and thoughtfulness that your field is known for to help the school system understand how to give our students the best possible arts education. And when we have this critical information, the arts community and the Department of Education need to work collaboratively through this public-private partnership to solve problems, innovate, and build upon success. ArtTable can play a critical role in this effort, and I would urge you to do so. You represent so many of the leading cultural institutions, and the students in our schools are the artists and audiences of the future. Not only that, this is an issue of particular concern to women. It is still true that the vast majority of people who work in education are women, and that the arts are most often nurtured by women. If we need anything in this country today, it is greater tolerance and understanding of others, and ability to thrive in a global society. It's hard to imagine how we could teach those lessons without the arts. And if any of you can get involved individually as a volunteer, mentor, staff developer, or teaching artist, I can promise you that nothing you do will be more rewarding. Thank you.